Hello and welcome to another episode of Digital Jamaica Live. I'm your host, Kadia Francis, and we're coming to you at a different time today. We usually go live at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, but stuff has happened, and now we're trying some evening sessions. So this is our first experimental time at 8 p.m. We're gonna see how that works out. We may switch around the times to see which one worked better. But thank you guys so much for joining me today. Before we jump into the conversation, the show is sponsored by G5 Cybersecurity, protecting your businesses from cybersecurity breaches. And if you thought that your business is too small to be hacked or too invisible to be noticed by people online engaging in nefarious activities, think again. And we've seen over the last couple of weeks the big mess that was the Massey hack. And today I saw, where did I see it? In the paper, in the Gleaner, where JPS was hacked a couple of years ago and said nothing to anybody. And it turns out that according to the whistleblower, a lot of information was leaked. So our confidential information was leaked on the internet. So saying that to say that no business is too big or too small to get hacked. And I think in a lot of instances when they hack small websites, it's practice. Just my opinion. But yeah, make sure that you are protected. Make sure that when you're building websites that you are engaging with persons who are knowledgeable about cybersecurity. Don't not spend money to secure your site because it's difficult to fix the problem once it has already happened. So invest in cybersecurity. Visit g5cybersecurity.com to get a consultation and to also make sure that you are in compliance with the Data Protection Act, because that's also important. But today on the show, I'm joined by two of the hosts of one of my favorite podcasts, Fishtea podcast. When people are talking about, what are the Jamaican podcasts that we need to listen to, this podcast is one that I always bring up because they're having some very serious conversations over there. It's not just kiki, but when they really get down into it, it's some very eye-opening, very interesting, very share-worthy conversations I think they're having over there. And I think a lot more people need to know about the podcast and tune into the podcast. And so I wanted to talk to them for some time. I've only recently reached out, and fortunately for me, they're here. So I'm gonna bring them on. Glenroy Murray, and I want to get his title correct because he's credentialed. Okay, so it's Glenroy Murray and Doctor Kareem Willis. Hey guys.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm fangirling right now because I love your podcast.
Oh.
I discovered it about a year or two ago, when I was really starting to pay attention to what was happening in the podcast space, because podcasting is relatively new to us in Jamaica. So I was paying attention to what are the conversations, the pockets of conversations that we're having using that medium, and how that medium is really giving us a voice. And I discovered your podcast, and I was hooked because I don't remember which one of you keep saying the tea. The tea is hot. Fishtea podcast. But guys, welcome to the Digital Jamaica live show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening as well.
Of course, number one fan. So, what we talk about on Digital Jamaica Live is we talk about the role of culture, the role of tech in Jamaica and the Caribbean, especially as it relates to culture and community, etc. And it would be remiss of me to not have a conversation about the queer community, because we have seen a lot of engagement happening around that subject matter. And before, mention gay, mention queer, and it was an instant way to shut down a conversation. People ears just went like this, and it was tone deafness, and was like, don't even talk to me. But now, not that the atmosphere has changed so dramatically, but changes are happening, right?
Right.
And I see where a lot more communities are being formed online, um, and they're very vocal, and they're not afraid to be vocal anymore, and I absolutely love that. So I wanted to talk to you guys about how you're using your platform and the really intense conversations that you're having on your platform, because it sounds cute, but there's some really intense conversations that you have over there. So I want to start with, how did you guys meet? How did you come together as hosts for the show?
I'll let Kareem tell the story.
Um, well, one, I think we knew of each other
Right.
before we kind of like came together, and so Cornell Gray, who was the original ideator behind Fishtea, we've been friends for over a decade. Wow, I have
More
friendships
than
that
a
have lasted
decade.
more than a decade. Okay, we went to high school together, Wilmer's High School, and he came to me and he said, um, there are conversations happening around queer people, Black queer people, but there's this place that's missing. There's this gap in the market around kind of like the Caribbean experience. And he asked me about the idea of what would it look like if we started a podcast. And I was like, well, I've always thought about being on a podcast, but I just never got around to it. And so we started having conversations, and then we both agreed that it would be dope to actually have someone who lives in Jamaica, because I live in the United States, he lives in Canada, and it's like it'd be dope to have someone who's underground mover shaker who could speak more accurately to our experiences, because ours would most likely be, we grew up there, we immigrated, and we'll be out of touch. And we kind of like went through a list, and then I was like, what about Glenroy? Because I've been following Glenroy on Twitter for a number of years now, and he was always vocal. I knew about his role at Equality JA and so on. And it's kind of like a unanimous decision. Cornell's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And we brought it to Glenroy, and Glenroy was just like, oh, yeah, girl, of course. Like, I was just like, okay, dope, let's do this. And that's how Fishtea the podcast was born.
Okay, so it's about it. So it's around community. Then it started with community, and that's kind of how you guys have carried it on. I want to ask you a question before we go on. Do you get? Do you feel some type of way when someone say, "Oh, you guys are brave," because really you're just being yourself. You're just being Dr. Willis, and you're just being Glenroy. You're being yourselves. So, do you get kind of ticked off sometimes when people call you brave for speaking out or talking about your struggles, when just about every other marginalized group do that, and you're really just being your human selves?
So I think because my day job is advocacy, and
Mm.
Fishtea is something that I do on the side, but adds to that in a kind of way. I got used to that from that side. I
Yeah.
used to kind of feel like, I used to be like, sure, because I try to be kind of sweet about it, but I came to a point where I get where people are coming from.
Right.
The truth is, within our context, they're not a laundry list of openly queer people who are willing to talk about their experiences.
Yeah.
And then even among the people who are sufficiently out, because outness, and we kind of unpack this in probably our very first episode on
Yeah.
Fishtea. Outness in Jamaica is on the spectrum, and even among the people that are out, they're not going to be talking about some of the things we talk about on Fishtea, because
Mhm.
we get into the mess, we get into the intricacies, we talk a business, and me
Yeah.
personally, I always try to get the business from people. And so I totally appreciate when someone says you're brave, they're also saying, I I appreciate the fact that through you we're able to experience this, and I receive it well. I receive it much better now than I did then, because yes, I'm
Right.
just living my life, but I'm also acknowledging that my ability to do that is a feature of a bunch of different privileges, and I
Right.
try not to take that for granted.
For sure, for sure.
Right.
I understand that. I always try to be careful because you want to have the conversation, but I am in Jamaica, and this is not a conversation we have very often. We tend to have conversations about the gay community or the queer community, but it's about them, not necessarily with them a lot of the time. And so there are fine lines that you don't want to cross because there's some things that are acceptable to say and there's some things that are not acceptable to say. And if you want to be sensitive when you're talking to persons for them to feel safe enough to express themselves, then you have to familiarize yourself with that. But it's difficult, or let me rephrase it. Can you appreciate that that is a difficult thing to do, to kind of tread that line, and that sometimes people are going to slip?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I kind of always have the conversation. They come always switch between hats. So absolutely, and I think from the my work side of things, I totally get that, and that's why we created like a media sensitization guide to help persons in media. But that's also the attitude that we take to everything that we do and the way
Yeah.
we do our work. You have to kind of take people along a journey. I always say we as queer people, we actually went on personal journeys, some with more traumas than others. And
Yeah.
so we recognize we have to take people along that journey. But that's those of us who decide to do this kind of work. The truth is, not
Mm.
every queer person wants to do that or should feel like they have to do that, because if when a queer person says, I don't want to do the emotional labor of teaching you, I totally get it. The job is draining. And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
if they want to check out of that, that's completely fair. But I recognize that that is a part of my job. Even if I wasn't working where I was working, that is a
Is
part
to
of just,
educate. Yeah.
yes, to help people along so that if not just for me, the next queer person comes up don't have to kind of do that work of getting you to recognize why you shouldn't use certain words and why you shouldn't say certain things. And I think a part of my hope with Fishtea is that in the range of topics that we talk about is that people are learning that those nuances and intricacies are, and are understanding that even amongst ourselves there's so much difference, there's
Mm-hmm.
so much learning and sharing and experiences that happen on the podcast with just
Right.
Kareem telling me their experience, me telling Kareem my experience, and of course our other two hosts currently who are Em and Lanville who are not able to be here,
Right.
them kind of sharing their experiences. There's so much difference within the community,
Yeah.
and that's what
Right.
I hope that the teaching happens.
Was it coincidental that you guys kind of share similar backgrounds? Because I know, uh, Doc, you said you was it Wilma's?
Wilma's, yeah.
Wilma's. Is there somebody that went to KC?
I did.
Glenroy.
Glenroy went to KC, right?
Queens.
So you guys kind of went to Big Boss school.
Indeed.
Yeah, the KC and the Woolmans, these are traditional high schools, but not just traditional high schools, but moneyed traditional high schools. Traditional high schools with a lot of resources. And I didn't find it strange that you guys had some very questionable experiences, let's just to say the least. And that in many instances you guys didn't feel protected or welcome in some instances. But on the other hand, I was surprised because these are schools with resources, meaning they could do better or can do better. So the question is, why do you think that this is not, why do you think that schools don't really pay attention to things like this, to conversations like this? Why do you think that they don't do enough um to protect?
I'll say something really quickly. And again, as someone who's like far removed from like my lived experience being in Jamaica, it's it's complicated, right?
Right.
It's like yes, they have a lot of resources, but what's a lot of resources in the hands of people who don't necessarily aren't as well informed or don't necessarily know what to do with those things.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of complicated because when you think about the nature and the landscape of Jamaica and saying you have funds for an LGBTQ identified student, a queer identified student, it
Mhm.
requires that student to kind of self-identify and kind of disclose
Out
their
themselves.
right to out themselves, and it's always tricky. So the one thing we talk about amongst our friend group, the F5, was we wanted to start a scholarship opportunity, and we wanted specifically for an LGBTQ identified um, student from Wilmers to provide them kind of like a travel abroad experience um, related to whatever we had studied back in high school. But one of the tricky thing was we didn't know how to say or how to navigate that to say, out yourself so you could get this opportunity. Like, how can we
Yeah.
say it without saying it, so to speak? So
Yeah.
I don't know. When I think about that, I think about how complicated that might be navigating it. Or Glenroy, you could add or correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, funny enough, me and my friend circle, we had a similar idea, and I mean, we thought about it actually, about what it would mean to try and support, queer students that might still be at Kingston College, and what would that look like within our landscape? Because there are other layers. When an older queer person tries to support a younger queer person, then there's that kind of uncomfortable conversation or
Mhm.
suggestion of grooming that comes along.
Grooming. Yeah,
Right.
So
yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
so there's that part that you have to navigate, and I have to doubly navigate that given my professional work that I do. So I
Yeah.
have to move as far away from those kinds of suggestions as possible. And I think also when you go back to like the schools, I think boys' school in Jamaica, in particular, when we talk about their resources, you have to unpack it in two ways. So the first part is their resources usually come from particular things. It's so that they can do well in the sports, they can do well
Sports,
in the
yeah.
sciences and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And so they go in a particular direction. And then the other
Right.
part is boys' school hit up against the notion that they are dens for homosexuality, as it were. So from
Oh,
the very yeah, so from the get go, when you go to KC, there's always kind of that snickering by outsiders that, oh, it's
that the
mostly,
perception. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I think a lot of times, in order to rebut the presumption of queerness within these schools, they either
Right.
ignore it, they don't provide any support or sufficient support to
Right.
queer students despite the resources. And so I think that's the space in which the queer student gets left out. And I think about one of the conversations we had with Dr. Andrew Campbell, who
Yeah.
also I found later in life
Went to
went to
Casey.
KC as
Yeah.
well, and he had a very particular traumatic experience. And even just us talking through that kind of shows you where those gaps are. You'd think that at the traditional all boys high school that would be there, but it's not a thing. And I think there's also a lot of them leave the school feeling like I don't want anything to do with that place, and so you leave queer students in limbo. So yeah, it's tricky.
Right. Do you think because there is this public perception that, oh yeah, all boys school, everybody there must be gay, or you're gonna have gay people there, that the schools themselves, in order to fight that perception over machoify
Absolutely.
Oh
That's
God,
why there
yeah.
was that's why there was
machoification.
that's why they was mad when I put up my picture in my tie, my school tie and my heels. That's why they
Oh,
was
they
Come on,
mad.
Fort,
were.
come
Oh,
on, Forties Queen.
That's why they was mad. Yeah, I mean, school they do that. I feel like they feel like the only way to kind of respond to the suggestion that the entire institution promotes homosexuality is to deny it and kind of push the students to the side. When, in my experience, going to the school is that queer students have contributed significantly to its development. I feel like,
sure.
Absolutely.
and even in the diaspora, even after as a part of the alumni, they continue to contribute. Of course, they're hiding while they're contributing, and so
Right.
I feel like they don't realize they oftentimes shoot themselves in the
The
foot
foot. Yeah.
by doing that. But I mean, once again, I completely understand that it is a tricky position for the all boys school to be in, especially when you have to navigate parents, and Jamaican parents can be sometimes. So I'm not gonna put it all on them, but I do think that there is a higher obligation on them, especially now, because I feel like a lot has changed. The internet is different. The access to information is different. My brother that goes to the school now, his experience there is different. And I feel like no, you don't have as much excuse as you had years ago when Kareem and I went to our
Yeah.
respective schools.
Do you think that response has something to do with the fact that both these institutions have some kind of church affiliation?
Child, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was waiting for Glenroy to stop talking so I could bring that up because when you talked about the over machoification of school. Well, first of all, that Glenn, we should make note that might be a whole Fishtea episode.
What you eat?
Seriously. But no, like it's one thing that I definitely experienced because I'm thinking about guidance counselors and who are deeply rooted and devoted to their Christian dogma and their Christian beliefs and values and so on. And I remember vividly, I told this story on the podcast about my guidance counselor who went up and he gave this morning devotion, this whole thing about, I forgot what scripture he tied it to, but he gave this whole thing about what a man should look like and how a man should talk and walk and act and dress and yada yada yada. And then
Ooh.
I'm there standing, like at the time I had my little nails. It wasn't as long as these, but it was there. And I enjoyed getting my little 600 manicures with my little top coat because you couldn't tell me nothing. And everyone literally turned around and looked at my group of friends in devotion as he's like listing off these things.
Oh
So
no.
it definitely plays like a huge role in how schools kind of deal with queer identified young men in these institutions.
Do you even think that they acknowledge that there are queer identifying people in these organizations? Do they even
No,
acknowledge it? Because I
no. I
mean, in
think they
order to
do,
start dealing with it, you have to actually acknowledge that that exists.
but not formally. I don't think they
Yeah,
formally acknowledge
yeah.
it.
Not like on an institutional level. They're different. Like it's something that they recognize, but they kind of like tiptoe around for those who want to tiptoe around, and the teachers who kind of try to be safe spaces for you kind of say it without saying it, right? And now, like at my big age, I have some of them on social media who would come out and say to me, like, I knew, and so I really tried to be this for you, and I get to thank
Mm,
them, like, oh my God,
yeah.
thank you for in the ways that you can, like in the ways that you navigated that, because understanding that they did the best they can at the time that they could.
Yeah.
Oh, I get
And I've
it.
had
Basically,
teachers like that who since reached out to me to ask for help for other people, not necessarily people who go to the school now, but for
right,
other people who they know that are queer that need support.
Mm-hmm.
right,
And so in my thanking them, I'm able to also kind of connect them to resources and information and anything that might be available as well. Because I mean, I think oftentimes what happens in situations like that, it sadly and unfortunately falls to the individual teacher, good natured, kind hearted teacher, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to kind of step in and be that refuge. And I, once again,
Right.
going back to that episode with Andrew, that I think that's what Andrew talks about when he says
Yeah.
right,
a teacher that sees you without even saying certain words to
right.
you,
Right.
like it makes the world of a difference to a student who is figuring themselves out as they go through puberty and understand their identity.
And that's such a delicate time. That's such a
It
delicate,
really is.
and I think when we're talking about, and forgive me for saying this, and you can let me know if this is offensive. When we're talking about taboo subjects, or at least taboo to our culture, a lot of times we tend to not address it or ignore it, but these are the lived experiences of people. These are people's lives, and it's such a formative time in your life. And then when we teach people to either ignore it or suppress it or whatever, how are we helping to develop our young people develop mentally? How are we helping our young people if we're not addressing something that is a very crucial part of their identity? That is something I often think about young people growing up in Jamaica poor, or young people growing up in Jamaica queer, or for any other thing that might make them a target, right? How are we helping them overcome that and become whole, fully functional human beings who are contributing positively to society if we are not helping them to navigate something that's really so heavy, you know?
So what I will say is this. I really don't think you can teach somebody how to fish if you don't know how to fish yourself.
Well, yeah.
And I say that and this is not to get anybody off the hook. But this is to say, if you go some steps back, I think
Mhm.
a lot of times teachers aren't given the training, and not just teachers, teachers and school administrators aren't given the
Yeah,
trainings, the tools, the
that's true.
resources to be able
Yeah.
to help students in this way. So you're absolutely right. They get left by the wayside, and especially because a lot of times, unfortunately, what happens is these it's when it's at a crisis level. Somebody finds out that somebody's queer, and then it becomes a big thing. So I think a lovely representation of that. Barracks Entertainment recently did a 6-part YouTube series called True Colors that featured queer issues and a
Yeah.
young queer person in the school setting. And just it's in those, but you can go to episode 6 is where the attack claps come, and in that particular part, I remember, so we did a watch party last week, and so many of us as queer students watching back that scene, even as adults now, we have an exact moment
Triggering.
where that scene happened.
Yeah.
Even if you
Mm.
weren't the subject of it, you know exactly that day at school when that thing happened. And
Yeah.
Right.
you know also that there were very few people who were able to step in an adequate way. At
Yeah.
most, what they're able to do is stop the violence or mitigate the violence that happens. And that's the physical violence. We're not talking about the emotional harm and the psychological harm and all of
Right.
that. And so that I think what it speaks to is just a failure, an institutional failure. And the only response is really is the powers that be at the policy level and within the training institutions have to be more willing. And some are, so I'll give them that just based on my other hat. Some are willing to have those conversations, and we're trying to have those conversations so that we're giving them the tools so that they can navigate it a little bit easier. But it's a reality that oftentimes
Yeah.
students fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think, because I hear your advocacy voice and I hear you being reasonable. Do you think you got to this point because this is what you do, and because, or is it because you're now grown up enough to see certain kinds of nuances, so the anger has diminished a little bit, or the anger at how you were treated and the experiences that you've had, um has that diminished some because you are now more aware of certain things, or more aware of nuances? Or is because you're an advocate, or is it because you're online and you're going, listen, I don't want to stir up no shit. So
It's both. It's both. Hello, used to be acted. Proper acted. I think that's actually how I became kind of more well known on social media. I used to be a proper acted you. I think it's both though. I think a part of growing up, if you grow properly, a part of growing up is learning those nuances, right? Is learning um the middle ground. And I think my job exposed me to those nuances
right.
critically. Especially when you sit in a room, and I think I've said this on different platforms, when you sit in a room with people who in day one of a training, on a 3-day training, day one, you're seeing them kind of side eye you and they distrust you. And then by day three, you're hugging and you're saying bye and they're telling you how much
Kumbaya.
they're
Yeah.
yeah, how much they enjoy the conversation and they wish more of this was possible so we could all get you realize what is possible and really what is missing within their own experiences
Mhm.
that get them to that point. I mean, and I think but I absolutely recognize that being an advocate, you kind of have to learn to disassociate in a way emotionally. So it's not a job for
Yeah.
everybody. And
Yeah.
we kind of train other like younger LGBT people or just general members of the community to tell their stories. We tell them that listen, you need to learn that's a skill to learn to know when to disassociate and to understand, all right, this conversation is not for me. I am not able to keep it cool here. And so I'm gonna have
So
to
you
step
take
back.
away
So
your
I
sword.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, I know what my limits are. And so, but it's just
Right.
that with this, it's the training and the experiences have all kind of got me to a point where it's easier for me to kind of
Easier.
be a bit more understanding. But I do have my triggers
Yeah.
Yeah.
that are connected to my own experiences.
Dr. Willis, is it because of your, and I'm gonna keep saying Dr. Willis,
Right,
is it
true.
is it because of your training why you think you're at a point where you can be a little bit more empathetic to people who probably, to be fair, don't deserve empathy, but you can be empathetic because you know, understand, you're more aware of cultural nuances, and how people have been, what's the word, how people grow up, and how
Yeah,
people think about certain kind of things. Do you think your training contributed to you now being able to have a kind of leveled conversation where you're like, yes, they should have done this, but because of so and so and so, then you can be a little bit more forgiving, let's just say.
absolutely, absolutely. And to Glenroy's earlier point about queer people going through their own journey. I think about like my coming out experience. It wasn't as, I guess, traumatic as some of people of other experiences. But what it did teach me is that in the same way that I had to kind of like come out to myself, come to terms with my own sexual identity
Mm-hmm.
and orientation and all of that, I sometimes have to allow people the grace and space to do the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to that end, I kind of pride myself on being the space that people can come to, people who are not of the queer experience can come to me with the questions that they consider ignorant or use the wrong terms or like use the language that you have to describe what you know and
Yeah,
allow us to go on this journey of kind of like coming to the right terms
that's so
or
great.
the
Yeah.
more appropriate terms. So yeah, definitely my training. I was a peer educator in my undergrad years. We had this thing called Out Front where we run around sharing our stories and allow people to kind of like engage in dialogue around that. So that kind of help kind of, I guess, get me accustomed to some of those more ignorant questions, if you will. Um, and then kind of therapy, got to give it up to therapy because going through therapy, the privilege of having gone through therapy and could continue going through it, it allows me to kind of um, understand that sometimes people's lack of knowledge, lack of awareness has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. Even just recently, I
Yeah.
just literally just had an experience where I was getting ready to go to a conference. I went to get some earrings to help brighten my face up for my outfits and so on. And as I was walking in my community, literally just in shorts and like a cropped hoodie, some dude who was running to catch a bus literally prized the bus door open to go, dude, like, aren't you a dude? Aren't you a dude? Why are you dressed like that? And in that moment, I could have said the most ignorant things and call him all types of MFs. But I was just
And it
like, you
probably
know
would have
what?
been justified.
Right. But I was just like, you know what? This person is, I don't
Don't
even know
deserve
what's
your
going.
energy.
Don't. And so I learned not to wear some of that over the years. Like that whole idea of disassociation, I've learned not to wear some of the things that people bring my way because it's bigger. It's bigger than just
Yeah,
that
it's not about you, it's
interaction.
about them.
Right.
What I'm hearing from you guys is three main things. And well, one thing with three things involved. So you talk about privilege, some of the privileges that you have now that you are removed from the situation. You're no longer living in Jamaica.
Right.
And also that you're educated, and education can
Yeah,
sometimes enlighten, not just academically but enlighten socially as well. And I hear you guys talking about having dialogue, and all those things I think are come under the umbrella of privileges, because it's not things that we can freely do here yet. Recently there was a march. I think there was a gay pride march for Pride Month. Was it a march? Yeah, I think it was kind of a march, or yeah. And surprisingly, well, and this is from my opinion on the outside of the community looking in, I think it went relatively well given the situation. Members of the community might think differently, but it's still something that is so taboo. And it's not yet something that people can, oh, I'm just going to do that, and they don't have a second thought about it. So you guys being removed from that situation, you're overseas, and we tend to think a lot of the times that because you're overseas, you're in a better place,
Well,
right?
Glenroy lives in Jamaica still,
Grandma,
right?
you're still in Jamaica. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah, 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 yeah. I
You
was gonna, I
know,
was, I was gonna let you finish. I was gonna let you finish.
okay, okay, okay. So this is definitely for you, Doc.
Yeah.
So people tend to think that because you're in the states, right? Or is it Florida?
Mhm.
Or
In the
is it
States, yeah.
Canada? You're in the states.
Yeah.
You are in more queer friendly places. We know that's not true. We have social media, right? So the conversation that you were having with Dr. Campbell, when Dr. Campbell was talking about how we tend to transplant or attitudes towards certain things into the diaspora. So Caribbean people move from Jamaica or other parts of the Caribbean, go to Toronto or go to the foreign, or right, and we go with the same attitudes and the same kind of thought processes. And even though we're in a position where we can become more enlightened and we can become more educated and we can have dialogue and community, we choose not to because we're still stuck in that mindset. How do you deal with that?
Child, I have my theories, but you talk and you live there.
Maybe I avoid some of these places. And I think in a sense it worked for my family, right? So when I came out to my family, my process was almost seamless in that my majority of my family members had lived one of two places in the States or in the UK. And so when I came out, like my grandmother, my brother, they were like big, huge champions of like telling my mom, no beat him, no beat him, nothing wrong with him. Gay people are some of the nicest people I know, and da 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 da. But then living here and I live in New Jersey, in a part of New Jersey that is like heavily Caribbean influence, like heavy Caribbean presence. And I say Caribbean because a lot of the beliefs kind of like translate. Um, but some of the places I avoid because I was just like, I don't want to deal with that. There was a time where I was scared as hell to walk into a Jamaican restaurant because I was just sure that somebody in there would say something, and maybe 8, 9 times out of 10, you can best believe you can hear the snickering as soon as I walk in, especially if, like my nails are visible, or even if I'm just like trying to exist
A
and
bad
there's
man.
nothing visibly clear. Child, you don't have to tell me twice. There's anything visibly clear. So like, I don't know. I think, and that up until recently, I've really been avoiding some of those places. I've just kind of like found the courage to kind of like just boldly go into them and just be like, look here, you have a talk, you have a talk. If my hands out, you have a talk. If my pants tight, you have a talk. If it loose, you have a talk. So better you just talk. And I get my food and I go by my business and do what I gotta do. But it's a constant struggle here when you go into like those largely Caribbean, Jamaican spaces where you're like bound to kind of, I guess, experience the ignorance is the best word I could find right now that you would experience back home.
And I would,
Glenroy,
I would,
yeah.
I would hazard to, I have my theory, and we're gonna actually have an episode on this. I have had a theory for about 3 years now, just based on my experience having lived elsewhere for a short period of time. That our diaspora is actually more homophobic than local Jamaicans. That is my theory that I am sticking by, and I say that because my view is they leave with a certain view of Jamaica, and they hold on to it for
And
dear
it doesn't
life.
evolve. Yes,
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
whereas here, we're having the conversation in ways that they're not even seeing that we're having the conversation.
Yeah.
And so we're chipping away at it here in a way
Look,
that's
look a
it's not
bicycle.
there. And it's not, and then also there are some racial lines to it as well that
Right.
make me even hold on to it a little bit more where they are. So it's not like them just stuck. Them really fight for them culture in an all encompassing space. But all of that mixed together means it rough when you're reaching out the diaspora area. You just want a little fried chicken and curd rice.
Right.
No
Like
way
I
you're gonna
can't I
get.
never go on street dance from a come here. Like I can't go down on street dance go bubble and feel comfortable. This is one
Oh,
club that's known for like good music called Castaways. I went there one time, I think with my family members, and somebody said to my father, Soji, I wish button man that back here. And I was like, oh my God. More I go home. I wanna go home. Like I need to leave. But no, Glenn Roy, there might be some validity to that theory. It is.
I think so too. And you can see it too in just the way that people are foreign talk about Jamaica. They have a particular nostalgia for Jamaica, but that nostalgia is old nostalgia.
Yeah.
And so you can tell in the way they talk about Jamaica that they have not evolved their idea of what Jamaica is, and a lot of them still
Mhm.
see Jamaica as this little quaint village back a
Right.
wall kind of place
Yeah.
with these poor, unintelligent people, and they need us in the diaspora to tell them what to do. And that was a
This idyllic
conversation.
Christian society
Oh yes, yes, this little
that is
village.
untainted by the world.
Yes, the Jesus village.
Yeah.
Yes, we I think they
Yeah.
tend to have that idea of.
Yes. Very dark.
Yes. But Glenroy, you living in Jamaica and having to navigate
Mhm.
that experience, what is it like on a daily basis? Because it sounds mentally taxing. I can tell you, it sounds mentally taxing. So how do you navigate that? How do you deal?
Well, you see, so it goes back to the privilege thing because it's not that taxing for me.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so one of the biggest privileges I think for anybody in community is having a space to recharge, is
Right.
having those spaces that you can go to just relax and have a good time and be around people that support you and love you and that are there for you. And I think because I've slowly built that over the years to where it is now. So even now, one, my personality just doesn't allow me to even notice when people depend when people say foolishness from a distance because they don't say it to my face. Um,
Per.
and and funny story quickly. Like me and my friends, we went out to this soca. Well, we go on a party, right? And this is a
You can't say
mainstream
soca
party.
party.
No, it's not a soca party. It's soca.
Mm,
I mean, it's soca and dancehall.
okay.
It was a mainstream party. It wasn't. It was about what we call colloquially a batty party. It was a mainstream party. So we go. I ain't my little shots because of soca. Me I go for the soca part of the party. So me have little shots. Anyways, we're leaving the party now, and so one of my friends joked that, "Why I look at the man over there, so I look one Glenn, I stress out, I say, "Oh, what is the man say?" And then I said, "Oh, sometimes I forget how queer I am." So in other words, I am so functionally tuned out to
So yeah.
people's perception or problems with my queerness, and I'm able to be that in the spaces that I'm in, that it's so easy for me to navigate this space. It's not that I'm not
Yeah.
confronted with anything because I still have to think about things from a work perspective and just managing different spaces, but my own experience is that it really isn't that hard for me.
Hmm.
And so what I do with that privilege is that I push the envelope
Yeah.
where I can, and when I can, I show
Yeah.
up in the spaces that I know I'm not going to be harassed and I'm not going to be bothered, or people, even if they have a thing to say, they're not going to say it. I show up in the heels, my love, and the keep them and everything because I feel like I have a responsibility
Right.
to be
To
queer.
be
I mean,
authentic. Yeah.
be authentically queer in that space
Yeah.
because then who else is going to do it? And who else is going to kind of let people know that this is a thing that is possible and that
Yeah.
is capable of happening? And so, I mean, it's been going well so far.
That's
I
something
really
I've
can't
taken with
complain.
me.
What's that? What's that, Kareem?
I'm saying that's something that I've taken with me because on the podcast I forgot what episode we're talking about and Glenroy talked about the kind of like the burden but also the responsibility of being visible
Hmm.
in certain spaces, and that's something that definitely I was talking about it in therapy today, and how kind of like how when I deny myself and my authenticity and I refuse to show up in the fullness of who I am, how I
I
feel, and
remember is
all
when
the
him never did one dress up for doing presentation. Him, I'm a cousin.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was talking about not
Yeah,
wearing heels to do my presentations. Yeah, yeah. Well, girl, you're proud of me because I've been serving on the conference route, honey.
as you should.
Um, but
Per.
yeah, right, big prayer. So Glenn and I talking about the visibility, the responsibility. It's yes, it's a burden, but there's this responsibility that we who have certain privileges to kind of navigate certain spaces, and that responsibility of visibility. And so that's something I've always carried with me about how liberating it is. And I've had people come up to me at these recent conferences and be like, "I love how you show up. Thank you so much for showing up. Continue showing up." And I was just like, wow, like to me this is nothing, but to you, like this is
Representation.
yeah,
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 and the real reason why I do it was because I also tutor a student did have that conversation with me once. Them time that I never did that wear nothing. I just did that with my usual clothes, but me can't
right.
hide. And after a semester of being with me, the student came up to me and was like, I'm really glad that you were my teacher because it provided a space for me. I was like, me say, and after that, I did carry on over the people in faculty because I was like, obviously, there's a need. There's an obvious need for people
For sure.
to on many levels to see queer people doing well and
Yeah,
being
the
in positions
visibility.
of power and authority,
Yeah.
Yes.
and just existing
Glenn
in
Roy,
that
me,
kind
you
of
both know that there are a lot of them in positions of power now. So,
yeah, but
uh,
yeah, but visibly doing it so that people know that
is a
hey,
visible part. Is a visible
Right.
yep.
part. Yes.
So yeah, yeah.
and that's a great way to use your privilege as well, where you're saying, listen, I'm not as burdened as people tend to think we are, or that we should be, because a lot of the times people feign concern about the community, and but really what they're trying to do is more oppressive to me, because they're going, aren't you burdened, aren't you sad all the time, aren't you mentally stressed? And you're like, no, I'm over here in my shorts jiggling my butt, I'm good.
Which is why I love fish tea, right? Because it's the fullness of that. Like
Yes.
it's the idea that we live full lives despite
Mhm.
these narratives that you
And
hear,
challenges,
despite these,
yeah.
right? Like we have been able to, yes, it's been taxing. Yes, it might have hindered our development in certain ways, but at the end of it, we literally exude joy and we emote and we feel all these
Yeah.
things, and we're not just like these one-dimensional caricatures that you paint us out to be in media.
Yeah.
Like we have full lives, we have heart, we have dreams, desires, we experience love, we give love. And I think that's what I enjoy about being a part of Fish Tea, like just being able to share all of that. Like just like you navigate life, we navigate. It might look different in certain spaces, and sometimes it's not even that different from what you navigate, but it's there. And I think Fish Tea does, if I may say so myself, Fish Tea does a wonderful job of just kind of like
I think so too.
presenting us as like three-dimensional people.
Because even when you're talking about heavy topics, somebody will bust a joke or somebody says something and the whole panel erupts. So like, this is it's
I'm
great.
not too bad.
Yeah. Do you think that is the message behind the podcast, that yes, we are three-dimensional people, we have this struggle, it's a very public struggle that we have, and we do have moments where, oh, you want to punch somebody in them face or tell somebody about their mother, but on the main, you're living your own lives the way you want to live your life, and that's freeing in other ways, and that's something that you're going to continue doing. Is that a herald to other people in your community to say, hey, this is possible, not just that this is a safe space, but it is possible for you to also do that wherever
Yeah.
you are.
So I think
It's
when I think
literally
about
in
it,
our intro.
yeah, so it's the
Yeah.
love, life, and laughter in the midst of all the white noise. Is it that
Midst
bit
Yeah.
of all the
in
white
the
noise.
in the introduction that tells you what it is? It's about
Yeah.
finding that joy and happiness. Something even as like, cause you can just listen to Fish Tea by just listening to the catch up that we do at the start, where we just
I
follow
like the
each other.
teasers.
No, but you
The
just
teasers
follow
are
each
hilarious. Yeah.
other's lives, and you just hear that development and growth. When we did a
Right.
check-in
I
on
love that you guys did check-ins at the top of the show.
yeah, when we want to know what going on with Kareem and the PhD journey, because it was a journey, job.
Yeah.
All of that, like it kind of brings it back to they're human people who are just sharing their views,
Yeah.
deep views, surface views, learning from each other about this critical thing. But one thing I would want to kind of caution, well, not really caution, but just kind of add to the conversation is we are able to do this for all these reasons, and we're very open about the kinds of privileges that we have. My
Yeah.
message to the community is always, listen, be strategic, like be mindful of
Yeah.
all the circumstances, and of course take the chances, push the envelope, but push it in ways that you're not going to kind of shoot yourself in the foot.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So that's my, so where you can make a when you can make a bold step, make the bold step, but don't just make the bold step and not think about the wider implications. So for example,
yeah.
one of the early episodes, I did talk about the difficult conversation I had to have with my younger brother who goes to KC after I did the picture and everything, and it was awkward at first. I mean, but it's been fine since. But it's just one of those things when you do these kinds of actions and you do these kinds of things, you do have to take sight of the wider implications.
Yeah.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
still have to be measured, and you still have to think about, okay, what is this representing, and what the repercussions of this may be.
What I tell younger queer people is like, be you, be all of you, but be you safely.
Safely,
Right. Be
right?
you safely. And that's something I had to navigate as I like started visiting Jamaica, because I've been away for a while, but going back, like I had concerns about cutting my nails and yada
Instead of
yada.
bling bling a
But
blind every minute the light catch the go bling.
but it's just like I had to learn how to be me. So for example, when I came the last time, I didn't I wore my nails, but I just put like a neutral color on because I was just like, I don't need to draw extra attention to
Attention to
myself. And it
yourself.
still allowed me to feel like Kareem because my nails are very much a part of who I am.
Mm.
But I was able to just like be me and be me safely. So that's also one of the messages like be you, be all of you, be the big, bold, beautiful, excessive, exuberant you, but just do it safely.
Safely. Where did
Yeah.
the name fish tea come from? Because I know there's a play on fish tea, but how did you guys come with that? Because I just thought that was so clever.
That was a me thing actually. So I was just kind of like running through episode names, like trying to come up with episode ideas and so on, because we had like this big production meeting that we wanted to do, and we didn't quite come up with a name. I forgot what other names were like swirling around. I think it was something like Queer Caribbean or something of that sort.
Mhm.
And then I threw out, I just said fish tea, and it just stuck. And then Glenn was just like, yeah, fish tea, cause fish tea like serving,
Serve,
like we
yeah,
are
yeah,
right
the tea hot
tea.
because
We're
fish is
we're
what
sit
we
down and we
call.
have
Yeah,
kiki. Yeah, we have giving a hot cup of fish tea and da 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 da. And then when we threw it out there, like people immediately got it. It took on a life of its
yeah.
own. People loved it and it resonated. And so we just kept it.
I just always thought that was so clever. I like when people put play on words, and I like when people take back words. I like when people take
Yeah, that
things.
was a part of it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take things and make it their own. So since you're calling us fish, we're gonna give you the tea. We're gonna give you all the tea about the fishes. Okay. I love it. I love it. So we were talking about what you think your message is, but in what way do you think your show has impacted your community? Because in my opinion, you have created a space to have, as I said at the top of the show, some very necessary conversation, some very in-depth, some very poignant conversation, I think. So what kind of impact do you think your show have on the community, or what kind of impact do you want the show to have on the community?
Well, I'll start with the very like immediate impact that I witnessed was just the fact that the show created community.
Right.
Um, it created this, and it's one thing that I never even really thought about, but like Glenroy and Cornell kind of like talked about it, how the show allows people who can't go to an equality JA or J flag for services
Mhm.
or someone to like tune into these conversations and feel like they're part of a community who can talk about these experiences and identify with these experiences and kind of allow them to learn and grow and stretch from listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense we create community, and kind of allow people again to be themselves and be themselves safely. So you could put your headphones in and listen to Fish Tea. Nobody be none the wiser, but you're
Yeah.
getting all that you need, right? You're getting, well, not all that you need, but you're getting a good chunk of what you need that you could use to get by. And that used to be a lot of the feedback, right, Glenn? Just kind of like how people feel like they're part of a community and feel like they're part of something and have something that's theirs that they can relate to.
Yeah. Glenn?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it's I go take it from the unofficial amateur queer historian that I am, and that is we have a habit in this community of not writing things down, not keeping good
Mm,
records, and Fishty in what it's done in the 3 years since we've
Is
been
that
doing
digital
this,
record?
it's created a wonderful record of queer history because we're having all the
Yeah.
advocates, all the leaders coming on and talking about the queer experience in Jamaica from as far back as the 70s.
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, we are talking to queer entrepreneurs about their businesses and their challenges that they're facing. We've carved out a space for queer women to come and talk about their particular experiences as well.
Mm.
We are talking about things and creating a resource that
Resource. Yeah.
people can always get the benefit of tapping into. And I think
Mhm.
that's what it does. It gives I'm hoping what I hope I that's what I know it does, but what I also hope that it does, it's a space of critical information that people can go back 2 years later and say, hey, there's all of
Kind of
this
say this is what we
information
were. This is
about
what they
Right.
were talking about at that time. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is what queerness in Jamaica looked, a version, one aspect of queerness in
Right.
Jamaica looked like through the lens of not just the hosts of the podcast, but all the people that came
The
through and
guests, yeah.
that told their stories, all the conversations. And I think even when we have like non-queer guests just come on and talk through their own understandings of things, even that in itself is so powerful. I
Yeah.
feel like to just have those kinds of conversations openly, which we oftentimes don't have in non-combative ways. And I
Yeah.
think that we
Yeah.
have a record of that, and people can say, "Oh, that's not bad." I think that also provides a beautiful space for people to kind of have something.
Just to
It,
quickly add, that would be like one of my dreams for us to like formalize what that looks like, right? In terms of like using the podcast as a tool for learning and educating, not just
yeah.
in
Well,
years from now, but like in, and I'm pretty sure you've probably been doing that, but just like in a way
well,
where,
so Javian was teaching because Javian used to he lectured at University UE. So
okay,
I think one of our episodes he actually was a
JV,
resource
and that's
specialist.
J flag
Javian Nelson, who used to be our executive director, he's no
for
longer
J
with,
flag.
yeah, he's
right.
no longer with Flag.
Oh, okay, okay.
Right, right. So he was lecturing at the university. One of our episodes, because he was lecturing in masculinities, one of our episodes was a resource material for the
Right.
students to kind of listen and get some
Oh,
perspectives
that's
on.
Oh,
great.
dope. I need to start counting that.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. That's
yeah.
that's an accomplishment. That's like Tupac Shakur module 101. That's
For real.
great.
So yeah, so a version of that is happening, but I think
Dope,
it
okay.
absolutely can be used for
Yeah, or the
teaching. And
Vibes
I,
Cartel talk that they did at UA. Yeah.
right. So that resource is there, and people, and I think we'll get to the point where we'll have like a version of that when we have
Yeah.
time, because I
Right.
think with Fishtea, we're very busy people.
My lord.
Question to you about that too. Is there any plans to expand out into a physical kind of? Do you do physical meetups, or is there any in real life things happening around the podcast?
We've done
We
it.
tried that pandemic mushroom
We've done it once.
once, yeah, when I
We did it
visited.
once when Kareem came, and we
We did
did
a
like a
live.
live episode at. We used J Flag's offices and page to do a live episode. It's difficult because we all live in different. So I'm the only one currently that's based in Jamaica. So
Mm-hmm.
it's that's the thing, because I would love for Fish Tea to have. So like I feel like we came up with a lot of in the what I call the podcast boom of 2019.
Right.
Just before the pandemic when everybody
Yeah.
was tuning into to podcasts. And I mean that we've stood the test of time is a testament to the efforts and the love and all the work that we've put in.
Yeah.
But we're a bit affected by the fact that one, well, our full time jobs, two, that we're all in different places. So to be able to kind of like do the whole YouTube thing and do like the fullness of what a podcast can be,
Right.
I don't think we're at a place right now
Right
to
now,
be
yeah.
able to do that.
Yeah. But I think
Okay.
what will happen will happen. Like, cause I see us co-hosting events and so on together. Like, I just that's my big dream. Like to
Yeah.
see the
That would be
host of
awesome.
Fishing
That would be
podcast
awesome.
hosting some type of fabulous fundraiser, something. But
The time has run away with me because there are two other things that I wanted to talk to you guys about quickly because I've made a particular observation, and the observation is that, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing a lot of people coming out. Let's just say, especially on social media, TikTok, etc. Most of them tend to be women, and I
Okay.
have I have a theory that maybe it's easier for a woman in Jamaica to come out because even in marginalized communities, there are certain groups that are more acceptable than others
So my
because
answer to
we
that,
because of fetishizations and other things.
well, so that's half the answer. So
Yeah.
halfly yes. So it's easier for us to kind of receive queerness among women
Because we watch a lot of
because
porn and we think, oh yeah.
yeah. But I remember that particular women takeover episode when they kind of talked about that seeing that
Yes.
girl on girl action in
Mhm.
dancehall, and did it actually mean acceptance? And their answer was
What's
no to that.
happening with that? There's been a lot of that lately, and I'm going, what the hell is happening?
Right. right? And
Is that performative queerness, do you think?
I mean, I feel like it's the male gaze. It's men. It's women. It's not about the women actually having interest, having wanting to create nurturing, long-lasting relationships with each other.
You're
It's
right.
about a sexual act that is desirable for men to visually be a part of, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
have
Right.
like that voyeuristic fascination of. And
Right.
so I feel like in that extent, it's easier. Also, it's easier to receive affection between two women because culturally, women need
Right.
to be affectionate.
Yeah,
But
we are.
but for
Yeah,
me, I'm always hesitant to kind of suggest that it's easier for women
easier. Yeah,
because their experiences are just different.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then when you begin to talk about like our trans community, then it becomes even more
Oh yeah,
layered.
yeah. That's oh
Because
yeah.
we're just not there yet
We're
with the
not there
trans
at all.
community.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, with
yeah.
understanding the trans experience and getting what even within that kind of specific Jamaican context what they're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The other thing too was Kareem, you said I think you referred to your father as Soji. Dr. Campbell had a when he was on, because as I said, that's my favorite episode, so I have notes. Okay. So when he was on, he talked about effeminate boys and the notion that boys are effeminate because they have absentee dads. And he says like, no, my father was like a hardcore man, he was macho,
Right.
but I still felt loved and I still felt appreciated, and even now I'm still loved and appreciated. My father loved me hard. Is that a similar experience that you have? Is there really a notion that, oh, he's too feminine or so because he grew up with too much woman, Jamaican people?
That's definitely a thing, and that was really why people speculated that I was gay back home. Like they never compared a man or family before. It was just always like, you always, you always I hung out with all these women, yada yada. But like when I think about the relationship with my dad has always been his notion of fatherhood is always like he's a provider. You never go without one. I will get the shirt off my back to make sure you're okay. And so we never had that kind of relationship where we were like huggy, huggy, huggy. Like now he will. Now as he's getting older, he's quicker to hug me and tell me he loves me and yada yada. But I don't think my acquaintance has ever been one. We've never really talked about it, but it's always that thing that was understood. It was just like,
Mhm.
I get you, I see you're my son, I love you regardless. And he'll send his messages in different ways. And I
Yeah.
never felt the need to have that conversation with him. But no, he was very much present in my life. He lived here for a while before I came here, but he was still very active. Like he would call and so on and so forth. But I don't think that's what led to it. Because even when my mom moved here, I was raised by my brothers, so I always had active male presence, sometimes some toxic male presence in my life.
Yeah.
And so I don't think like there's not
So
much
it's not
validity to
fatherless
it.
behavior.
It's not fatherless behavior. It
It's
it just is like it just
just
is. At
yeah.
one point before when I was trying to make sense of my own journey, I used to say, "Oh, like when I came out to my mom, it's like, oh, that's why I'm so close to you because I'm gay. That's why I love fashion because I'm gay." Yada yada. It's just like no, but you get to understand that it just is a function of just who you
Who
are.
you are.
I'm not sure it has much to do with socialization because nobody was giving me dresses and heels and wigs and saying, "Hey, wear this, put this on." Da 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 da. It's just like I liked it. I thought it looked good on me, and so I'm gonna wear it.
Yeah, and you definitely wasn't seeing that on TV. So we tend to try to rationalize things. The Jamaicans tend to try to rationalize things sometimes. So when we have the conversation about gayness or queerness, we tend to want to make sense of it or justify it to say, oh, well, they grow up with too many women,
Yeah, yeah,
or it's the TV and internet will always try to
absolutely.
find
Yeah,
something when it's really just who the person at some point we're going to have to accept that this is just who people are,
it just
and
is
this
what
is
it is, Verity.
it's as natural as anything else. So I mean, I don't know how we're going to work with it because we always try to justify it. Glenroy, in your work, do you see that happen a lot? Where do you talk to parents, by the way? Do you see parents trying to make sense of a child who they think is queer, saying that, oh,
So
well, it's this or it's that?
so I think I talk to parents, but not in their capacity as parents.
Okay.
So I'm talking to them as service providers, but they're also
Okay.
parents, and so
Yeah.
the fact that they're parents comes out in the conversation. It's not that we don't engage parents; it's that it's not usually on the basis of their parenting. We've tried.
Right.
It's just it's easier to get them as service providers than as parents. And I will say, I think it's always a thought. And so whenever we do like gender and sexual diversity trainings, or that's always an element of any of the trainings that we're doing, it is a conversation that we broach with them to kind of get them to recognize that queerness is not the product of
The devil.
misstep. No, no, the misstep of a parent. I think, especially mothers, they blame themselves a lot.
That's a
And
lot.
society blames
And
them too.
society blames them, and it's kind of getting them to understand that that's not the case. I think how we do that though is what we do is we have a panel, and we have community members that we've trained most of the times, or if we can't get one of those persons to attend, we do it in our personal capacities, and we just let them ask any kind of question they want to ask with. And it is in those conversations that you really get to hear what is at the heart of people's confusion, discomfort, and their unwillingness to kind of understand.
The adapt.
And that is a part of it. It's that sense of what will it mean for my child? Because even the last training I went to, everybody was all, oh yeah man, we're supportive, we're understanding. And then the question came up, would you accept your child if,
Oh,
and then it became a little bit more complicated than that. But what was beautiful about that is that we weren't the ones, and that's always my favorite part about when we do our work is I love it when we're not the ones going back and forth with the persons in the room. It's when they're going back and forth with each other, because that shows me that my work is slowly getting easier.
Yeah.
I'm not. It's not me against the masses. It's the
right.
masses against themselves, and I'm just saying. And sometimes I'm saying, "Why I understand where the girl here come from? No, me know say
And
it
you're
upon
just
my side.
facilitating.
Me know it upon my side, but take time with her, man.
right.
Yeah, because sometimes sometimes when a Jamaican has gotten to the point where they're accepting, they're really hard on the ones that are not.
Hard,
Yes,
yo.
that
They
is
go
true.
hard, and I have to be like, take
My
time.
mom, my mom, my mom, my mom. Y'all dare not come at me sideways, cause
So
Yeah,
yeah,
your
so
your your
hard.
mom your mom your mom wants all the smoke. Carry.
Listen. She has no time, no patience for any level of that. I'll be like, well, mom, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but
Glenn, what so you say you're glad when it happened because it's becoming easier, but what happens when it doesn't? What happens when a parent flat out don't want nothing to do with this child, wants to disown? Then what happens at that stage?
I mean, so when that is the situation, it's just under it's more about okay, what is the age of the child? Then if it's for us, I know them about my no. For us, it's if you're over 18, then we have resources ready and waiting that we can connect you to. And if
Hmm.
you're under 18, well, you're gonna have to go through this agency, but we also train people at those agencies as
Agencies.
well,
Hmm.
so that
So like
they
child protection agencies.
yes, our last training we had representatives from CPFSA, so that
Yes.
they are better equipped to support queer
What
children,
about
queer
the
youth.
police?
We've trained them in the past. Some are more willing than others. What I get from police is that every station different, and so it's what we're trying to do now is figuring out how do we get a broader sense of what things are nationwide, and then begin to do the work from that lens, because some places are better than others, and that's the case with kind of every service in Jamaica. Some places are better than others.
Hmm. Oh, last question, because I know you're ready to go. Kick up your heels. What is your hope for Jamaica, Glenroy? What do you want to see happen in Jamaica that would make whether make life easier, or I don't know, what do you want to see happen generally? Given all the work
So
you do and the podcast and all of that, what's the goal?
So what I always say is that I think the biggest barrier that we currently have is the fear. Fear of us. A lot of it is fear by association. So the people who really don't have that much of an issue are afraid to. be more open about not having an issue, even if they're not like card carrying allies. They're not card carrying homophobes either, and they're not saying that. So from my hope is for the few safe spaces that we have, and we do have them. Some of them we create, some of them have naturally emerged over time,
Mm-hmm.
for them to become the norm, where you can have a space where queer people can be in all their glory having a great time, and you have a traditional Jamaican family over there eating their food, minding their business, nobody having any issue. And I think
Cheating
that
on their wives.
Yes.
and that's the part there. And that only happens, I feel like, if that communities have the institutional support and the
Yeah.
information. That only happens through partnership and engagement. So for me, it's I want more people to be willing to have us at the table to have the conversations. It's growing, and I'm grateful for that. But the
Mm-hmm.
more people who kind of just bring us in the room and help us have those conversations, and then let
Yeah.
them to kind of figure it out, that will get us there.
So you want to get a seat at the table to at least have the conversations,
More seats,
and
because
then
I
hold
don't
more seats so
seats.
you
Yeah, because
can
I don't want to
plant
pretend I don't
plant
know.
seeds.
Yeah, because we've been planting and we've been seeing the fruits of that
Mm-hmm.
labor. We need to plant in broad, more spaces. So
More
it's
spaces.
more a widespread experience. That because people have been saying for years though, that changes are happening. We're feeling it, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it now needs to be at a standard. That
Yeah.
it's not just when I go to this part of Jamaica, I
Right.
Mm-hmm.
feel
Right.
it's more often than not. This is my norm. That's what I
For
Right.
want.
sure. Yeah. Kareem, what do you want to see? Because you went through the stresses and tribulations of that PhD and excitement. So, what do you want to see now that you have a different understanding? You see from your doctor spectacles. What do you want to see happen? What's the goal of all of that?
Sure, I just want me, you can go in at the same dance and I'm bubble together and nobody
Bubble,
back
bubble,
all
bubble,
right.
bubble.
But that's why I can come to Jamaica and not have to worry about how much we're going to rent car, stay in New Kingston or Pan the North Coast or avoid certain places. I don't know, I would just love to get to a space where we could just be and exist without justifying that. And even if you're not with it, then you respect me enough to give me the space and just let me be and you
Hmm.
be, and then
Mind
we
your
got
business
about
and
our
leave people
business.
alone.
That's it. Drink water and mind your business. That's all.
Okay. And how do you think your work leads to that, or is getting us or moving us in that direction?
Well, my work is mostly around how we fund spaces and organizations like Glenroy,
Yeah.
Glenroy leads. So um, I think just raising awareness around the importance of such spaces for the populations that they serve, and trying to get the resources. I consider a little bit of reparations, a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
for these um, individuals like myself who depend on them for their livelihood. And that's just that. That's how that's from my little corner, and how I get to be a vessel, just kind of helping to promote and lift up the work that organizations like Leroy does.
Okay, for sure, for sure, for sure, guys. I really appreciate it. There's a conversation to be had too about being poor and queer, because that's a whole
Whew,
other set of
Lord.
problems. And I'm not just and poor in terms of money, but coming from certain communities that are poor up here. Well, that's a
Yeah.
different conversation. Anyways, guys, listen, I thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys continue to have the conversations that you're having, because I consider myself an ally, and I'm an out and proud ally. I consider
Appreciate
myself, and I
you.
have always been that. I'm not just saying it because you guys are here. In my own way, I've always defended the idea of just leaving people the fuck alone. Listen, why are you sitting over there worried about somebody bottom? I've never understood why your day is preoccupied thinking about who's getting ass play. Okay, I don't understand that. But um and I do understand that, and I have come across a lot of people who feel the same way I feel, but they don't want to say that
Say
out
Right.
in the public.
And I was
um
just about to say thank you for doing what you're doing, even with your with your platform, and
yeah.
inviting us to have this conversation, because
Oh,
that's
for
how we move
sure.
the needle forward as well. Like we have
Yeah.
people or allies who are like and respectfully and understandably so, who are much more concerned about kind of like saving their platform or like preventing it from backlash than having conversations like this. And I think what this does is open this up to a different audience.
For
Even if they
sure.
don't listen to all of it, something will resonate.
I don't
I'm a
care.
firm
I'm sorry.
believer in
I don't care. I don't care. Honestly, I don't care, because if my platform is about talking about technology and culture, or how technology affects culture, digital, and my push is for more digital literacy, I can't have a conversation and leave out that an entire community. And my thing is advocacy, and I'm advocating for all sorts of different things, so I can't not talk about it. So if first of all, it's my platform, that's for one, and me lose sleep over it, right, and damn near prostitute myself for can't run it, so it's fine.
I
If
live.
it's fine, okay, that's where I'm at this point. It's fine. So I am not afraid to go there and have certain kind of conversation, because it's 2022 and people really just need to get over it. So that's where I am. But I really do I really appreciate it, finding your podcast and being able to, I feel like I'm being let in to something that's deeply personal, and something, it's a whole different world, and I feel like I'm being let in, and I've learned so much about, because you never think about what the experiences other people are having. You know, really, because you're so preoccupied as a young person growing up. You're so preoccupied. I was preoccupied with the Hanson brothers, Umbap. That, wish I was a white girl with blonde hair. That was my experience growing up. So you don't really think about other people and the spaces that they're in, and you don't really think about your privilege either. So growing up now, having the as you said, Curry, in my big age, realizing that certain things are happening, and realizing that I have a platform that I can talk about it and share about it, and other people have platform, and I can use my platform to platform other people. Amazing stuff. So guys, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. Keep doing the awesome work that you guys are doing over on Fishtea podcast. Yeah, and I definitely will be tuning in every time somebody say, okay guys, recommend some podcast, top on my list, y'all go listen. It's really good.
I
All
appreciate
right guys, really appreciate
our
you being here.
Thank
Dr.
you. Thank you
Willis
so much.
and Glenroy, you're going for your doctor too?
And I'm not gonna put no pressure upon me. It's it's a thought.
Well, yeah, it's a thought. Okay. I'm not going back to school. I'm done. But all right, Glenroy, Kareem, Dr. Willis, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys.
yeah, for sure.
All right, then take care.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
And guys, I really mean that. I mean, listen, I talk about a lot of things on this platform. I've had so many people on this platform talking about so many things, and I think it would be remiss of me to completely ignore that digital, and this is something I tell my students all the time too. Digital is such a powerful platform that we create these soapboxes on, where we can tell our side of the story, share a lot of the stories, because for a very long time we've had people talking at us, especially as people in Jamaica and the Caribbean. We've had people tell us who we are, in their own way, talk about us, not talk with us. And so now that we have digital platforms where we can talk about ourselves, and we can have more nuanced, more in-depth conversations about who we are as a people, and that we're not one-dimensional, right, and that Jamaica is just as flawed as everywhere else, but it's also just as great as everywhere else. And it's because we have all these different communities coming together. And so I'm going to talk to people from different communities, okay, and y'all need to be okay with that. Anyways, I do appreciate Dr. Willis and Glenroy, two of the hosts from the Fish Tea podcast, coming on and talk to me. I had a wonderful conversation. There's so much things I wanted to talk about with them, but the time, guys. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. As I said, we're experimenting with the different times, because I'm gonna at some point tell you guys why the 10 a.m. slot is not gonna work out anymore. In fact, on the next show, I'm gonna talk about it and why I am quitting entrepreneurship. I'm quitting entrepreneurship. I'm gonna talk about that's gonna be the subject of our next show. And y'all just gonna have to follow us on the socials to see when that next show gonna be, because I got work. Okay. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to our sponsors, G5 Cybersecurity, for making this show possible. Because without them, there will be no show. All right, guys. So I will see you next time on the Digital Jamaica Live Show. Have a good night. Bye.